What makes me really sad, Owen, is I've lived around here all my life and we've been through a lot as a community over the last 5 years, and it makes me really sad to think that some people are coming to Batley and Spen and using us as a political football for their own means, with their own agendas, and when they all go, when they all disappear, when the circus leaves town, we all have to live here. I have to live here, my family have to live here. So it does upset me that there's going to be some nastiness in this by-election, and it's just not my style. I'm doing my very best to rise above it, but that is a challenge at times.
Can I ask, I know this is something you always get asked about your sister. How do you feel about the fact that, that was a terrible political tragedy for this country, but for you it was personal beyond words. And we've now got, in this constituency, there were far-right candidates standing, and she was killed, of course, by a far-right extremist. How do you feel about the lasting impact, not just on the community, your family, seeing the continued presence of the far-right in politics?
I think he says it all. Yeah, look, I think about Jo every single day. My story is my story. Jo was my sister, and for the last few years people have known me as Jo Cox's sister, and I'm extremely proud to be so. But I'm fighting this campaign as Kim Leadbeater, with my own life experiences and my deep care and compassion for this community. And people are going to come here and try and divide us, but they've tried before and they've failed. And I think it's really important that as a community we don't engage with the negativity and, quite frankly, at times the poison that people are bringing to our community. As I say, when they all go, we all have to live here peacefully together, and the people around here are good people. They don't deserve to be used in this way.
So what's Labour's vision for the country as you see it now that's distinct from the government?
Labour's vision for the country is about equality, it's about fairness, it's about social justice, it's about looking after people who've got us through the pandemic, it's about treating people fairly, and it's about standing up for those people that feel they're not being listened to. A voice for the voiceless, as we would say. And certainly that's the vision I have for Batley and Spen. It's about making sure every single person in this constituency is heard. People have had a really tough time over this last 15 months. I want to speak to nurses, I want to speak to teachers, I want to speak to doctors, and I want to speak to people who've kept our shops going. It's really, really important that everybody feels that they are valued, because they really are.
So we spoke today to lots of Muslim voters who voted Labour all their life. Some of them, one was a former Labour councillor, many years, and they talked about their father, their mother, their grandparents, ever since they came here, Labour through and through, and they're voting for George Galloway. What do you think's happening there?
I think we have to accept as a Labour Party that we have got some disillusion, and I think what we've got to really do is work on getting those people back so that they understand the Labour Party is their home. There are 16 candidates on the ballot paper for Batley and Spen, and there's only one person who lives here, and that's me.
But in terms of, that's important to lots of people having a local candidate.
It's very important.
But for lots of those Muslim voters we spoke to, they're annoyed with Labour, basically. They feel Labour has abandoned them, they've been taken for granted, and they don't think Keir Starmer's leadership is talking to them. So how would you say to them, as the Labour candidate, we're going to win your support back? Because at the moment they're angry with Labour.
Absolutely, there is a lot of anger out there, and I understand that, and it's important that we listen to that. What I would say to that is, what matters is the future of Batley and Spen going forward, and we need an MP who understands the area, who's prepared to listen to everybody across the area, and deliver on the things that they care about. And the conversations I'm having are very, very varied. We have to be really strong on Palestine. The situation in Palestine is horrific. We have got innocent men, women and children being killed.
What would you do in practice?
My job is to put pressure on the Labour Party and the government and the international community to do more. That's my job.
What would you want them to do with Palestine?
Well, we need to work towards a two-state solution. The first thing we do is get the peace talks started again.
Would you stop arms sales to Israel?
I think I would need to get involved in those conversations and those discussions.
Okay.
Look, there will be people who are far better informed than I am on the Palestinian issue. My job is to listen to the people of Batley and Spen and to take their voice forward into those conversations.
I suppose with Muslim voters, when we speak to them, I suppose that's what would concern them. They think with George Galloway, look, one of the most divisive people in the country, George Galloway. But for those voters, they think he's clear on Palestine. He will just say, if I asked him that, he would say, end arms to Israel and put actual, support, withdraw British support for the Israeli occupation.
Look,
for the Israeli state whilst they're occupying the Palestine. But you can't say that. And then what would a Muslim voter say to that in response, do you think?
I think what I would say to that is we've got a conflict that has been going on for 70 years. And we've got people dying, people without electricity, people without water. The first thing that we have to do is get peace talks restarted. That's absolutely the first thing. We have to be then working towards a two-state solution. We have to be ending the blockade of Gaza. We have to be stopping the human suffering that's going on there. That is the absolutely most important thing. it's more complicated than somebody like George Gallagher would have you believe. Let's be clear.
What about Kashmir? I mean, I say this. I know it should be about, we think, but at the end of the day, candidates don't choose the issues. The voters do. People keep talking about Kashmir.
Yeah, again, the rights of the Kashmiri people need to be put first.
Would you support a referendum, the potential independence for Kashmir?
Look, the first thing I need to do is get myself elected as the MP and to have those conversations. My job is to listen to the people of Batley and Spen, take their views forward within the Labour Party, towards the government and within the broader international community. That's my job. If anybody's telling you they're going to wave a magic wand and solve Kashmir or solve Palestine, sadly, they are lying to you. And actually, what we've also got to do is talk about all the other things that local people care about. So this has to be about local issues, national issues and international issues. But ultimately, there's lots of people who are going to turn up in these next few weeks who didn't even know where Batley and Spen was until a few weeks ago. I've lived here all my life. So those issues that people have got are my issues as well. So they need an MP who understands those issues. I'm very, very clear about that. People are going to turn up here with their own agendas and their own egos. It's not fair on the local people.
You're talking about constituencies who carried us through this pandemic, for example. A huge sacrifice. Nurses. So there are lots of nurses, of course, in Batley and Spen. Would you support a pay rise of 12.5% as the Royal College of Nurses?
I think nurses need to be paid a fair wage.
12.5%
Absolutely.
Pay rise increase?
I would have to look at the figures in a bit more detail, Owen. It's not as simple as me just again waving a magic wand
and
picking a figure out of thin air.
Picking a position, surely. The Royal College of Nurses said that's what nurses should get.
I think nurses deserve to be paid more. I'm very, very clear about that. I went out for a drink with a friend of mine who's a nurse. She said, I'll get this round in, Kim. I've just been given a 30 pence a week pay rise. Not good enough, is it? Let's be really clear about that. Okay. So again, my job is to speak to people about nurses being paid fairly, teachers being paid fairly, addressing all the issues that have had a result of the pandemic. But again, we can't just wave a magic wand and make these things happen. My job is to get involved in those conversations and be a loud
But people want a clear
voice.
position, don't they, from their Member of Parliament?
Absolutely,
They want to know where they stand.
Yeah, and once I'm elected, all those things will be considered, and I will come to my very clear points on them. But
would you get rid of tuition fees? Would you vote to get rid of tuition fees for young people?
I'm not a massive fan of tuition fees. Absolutely, when I did my degree at 25, I didn't have to pay anything. It was absolutely wonderful to get a degree without having to pay a penny. I think £9,000 a year is excluding so many people from education. I think it's really difficult. I used to be a lecturer at Bradford College. It's a massive barrier to people to think that they're going to get into so much debt. So yeah, those are really important conversations to be had. But people are also sick of thinking that there is a magic money tree, so there isn't. So we've got to be really clear to people about that. So all these things need to be looked at in the round, and that's what the Labour Party is doing at the moment, looking at its policies, looking at where the money needs to be spent and how we can produce a fantastic manifesto ready for the next general election.
Just a couple of things before we knock on doors, because I want to see what the voters think. You're seeing people speak about you very warmly around here. They think you're a great campaigner, that you've got a great personality that connects with people.
Well, that's lovely to hear, thank you.
But lots of people, lots of your Labour colleagues think this is lost. They think the Tories are going to win this seat.
Nobody is telling me this seat is lost. I don't know who you've been speaking to, but nobody is telling me that.
Labour councillors are telling me that.
Oh?
Why do you think? Because normally opposition parties do better in by-elections than they do in a general election. That's not your fault.
No,
whose
absolutely.
fault is it then?
Well, I think we're in a very complicated set of circumstances. We're just coming out of a global pandemic. People have been through an awful lot.
And also the government messed it up, so Labour should be doing really well.
Absolutely. But we also know there's a huge amount of support for incumbent governments, incumbent parties. So we know that we're dealing with that. We're also dealing. Batley and Spen is dealing with 5 years of turmoil, to be quite honest.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So there is a huge amount of voter apathy. There is a huge amount of people who are just sick of having the doors knocked on and thinking, here we go again. So it's complex. Most things in life are out there. It's not simple. There's not just one issue that people care about and are talking about. So I think the really important thing is that we hear what people are saying to us.
Yeah.
And my job is to ensure them that if I am elected as the only candidate who lives here locally and has lived here in my entire life, I will do my level best to represent them and their concerns and their needs. You will not get anybody who cares more deeply about this community. And for me, that's what being an MP is about. You're a public servant.
Very lastly, because we need to knock on doors and you're organising it very, obviously you want to go and talk to those voters and win the election. Should Keir Starmer resign if this seat is lost?
Look, whether Keir Starmer resigns is a matter for Keir Starmer, but it shouldn't be based on Batley and Spen. This is a really important by-election. It's really important, but for the people of Batley and Spen, it's not about Keir Starmer. Let's be really clear.
For some it is, we spoke to them.
Well, but then it shouldn't be, should it? It should be about the future of this area. I've worked here for the last 5 years through the charity, bringing people together, uniting communities, helping people who feel lonely, people who've been struggling down through the pandemic. This is not a referendum on one individual or one person, and anybody who tries to make it about them, quite frankly, has not got the best interests of the community at heart, and that's what I very, very clearly have. So anybody who is voting needs to think really carefully about what happens to our area in the next few years, and they need someone who cares and who is happy to represent them with a powerful, strong voice in Westminster.